And the one thing that you guys all need to remember is majority of you listening to this right now are either sitting in a car listening to this, sitting at home, reading this on an email, whatever it might be, and you are sedentary more times than you should be, right? All right, what is up, everybody? Episode 25 of Pursuit of Balance. We're going to talk about what's missing from most people's training. And this conversation I had with a client last week and some of the things that I'm kind of organizing for the nutrition challenge that we're doing at the beginning of the year, which is probably by the time you guys are hearing this might be then. And, one of the things that I've kind of been adding back to the routine that I used to be really good at that I haven't been so much with this last year, maybe 2 years, is kind of some of these little stackable items that we can kind of put on top of the training, right? So I wanted to break it down a little bit more. I was going to talk about deload and the purpose of deload weeks. And I was going to talk about kind of this piece. And I'm just going to kind of mix all this together, right? Because I think for those that are training, listening to this, a lot of us, are obviously in a better place than the majority of the world that aren't training. But even for those that are training, one of the things that I've always said on the front end for people is like, I still know plenty of people that go to the gym that don't see results. Right. And that's obviously a very frustrating thing when you're spending time, money, energy, and resources to do something and you're not seeing an ROI on it. Right. So that's a little bit more of what I wanted to kind of consolidate down on today is like, what are the things for those that are training that we maybe could be adding more of on top of the workouts in conjunction with the workouts or just internally with the workouts itself. Right. So I wanted to start with that first. It's just like inside of the workouts. And this is something I probably see the most with new clients when I'm talking to them on the front end of like, the thing that I always like to get across is like medical history, exercise history. And exercise history for me is, it gives me a lot of data on what's worked for somebody and maybe what has not worked for somebody. Because for those that are going to the gym, like I said, this episode's different if you're not going to the gym, because then you just need to, if you don't need an episode for that one, you just need to start going to the gym. And that could be, maybe that could be a separate thing. But one of the things that we see a lot of when I'm talking about exercise history with people is like, I'm like, all right, well, take me through a little bit more specifics of what we're seeing inside the workout, right? Are you planning your workouts? Are you like, how does the programming look, for example? Are you tracking your weights, tracking your times? How are we progressing these workouts over time? Is there a periodization as far as the cycles are stacked? A lot of that stuff, they're like, I don't even know what the hell that is. And some people are like, yeah, I was doing an online program or I had a coach or whatever it might be. So, and I think this is even a message for coaches and trainers like myself, where it's very easy for us on our personal workouts or even just our workouts that we do with clients, maybe that are a little bit more OG, to sometimes kind of fade away from that. And I think when you think about exercise without those details, it's just a really easy way for you to maintain what you're doing, but it's a really tough way for obviously to see some progressions. So the first thing I want to kind of talk about is kind of the structure of the cycles itself, right? So the first thing you guys need to remember is like when you're planning workouts either for yourself or if you're in a program like Functional Lifestyles or a gym or a trainer or an online coach, an online program, obviously the stuff would kind of be taken care of for you, but the things that you need to remember on how and why they're programmed is the first and foremost is going to be the progressive overload, right? So if I were to take even one step farther back, the first thing we need to remember is what are we progressively overloading, right? And I think a lot of us forget that because we're not going back to just the planning side of it of like, where am I currently at, right? Something I talked about either last week or 2 weeks ago in an episode was talking about like the kind of the perfect stack of balancing aesthetics or balancing performance or balancing health and longevity or whatever that might be for you. So no matter whatever the goal is for you when you're talking either to yourself if you're doing this alone or if you're talking to a coach when you're doing this with your check-ins, your personal training, you need to figure out what is the direction and the kind of where am I going with that first? Because with a plan and a target, more importantly, then I can obviously have more, context around what am I actually progressively overloading, right? But no matter what, no matter the goal, a lot of these principles are still going to apply, right? So when you think about what is periodization, what is progressive overload, the thing is you need to remember is your body is being provided a stimulus, right? Your body doesn't know what the tool is. It doesn't know if it's a kettlebell or a dumbbell, or if it's an incline run, or if it's a flat run, or if it's Stairmaster, or if it's a rower. Your body is getting a stimulus either through this increase in heart rate, right? Or a use of a muscle group, right? And that fatigue and the intensity and the volume and the combination of all those things is what allows for an adaptation to actually happen, which allows you to get stronger, which allows you to build a better aerobic capacity, which allows you to improve range of motion, whatever that might be. So when it comes to the training, I think the big thing that a lot of us are missing is just understand those principles need to be applied if you're in a phase of wanting to see progress, right? And I use that with context because I've gone through plenty of phases in my life where, to be honest with you, I was kind of just in a maintenance mode. Like I didn't really have these really aggressive goals. I was training more for my sanity and my mental, honestly, because it's like I knew that like me getting some energy out and working out and keeping my body moving and making myself feel good by doing something for myself and dedicating a little bit of time for myself, like all those things just made me feel better, right? And for me, there was a long phase, especially when I opened up the gym, where I kind of was like in that phase. And I've gone through these cycles, obviously a lot more so before I opened up FL, but like I've gone through plenty of little cycles where I'm like, you know what? I really want to focus on X, right? I want to bring some more Olympic lifting back, or I want to bring some more cardio back, or I want to improve my running, whatever that might be. So when you're in a period, that's where I say like if you're in a period of wanting to see progress, like what is the thing that we're trying to actually progress is going to make this programming a lot easier to understand, right? So for me personally, I'll share kind of where I'm currently at. I am really trying to prioritize bringing a lot more aerobic activity and just cardio back into the routine. And I'm mainly looking at this from, I would say priority number one is health, right? Like just longevity, how I feel, my biomarkers, how I'm sleeping, cardiovascular health, etc. A little bit of aesthetics, right? Because I think it's just one of those things that just allows me to kind of stay a little bit leaner and feel a little bit better about like how I look. And then obviously the performance, right? Like I like to be able to train hard. And when I want to be able to train hard or get into a season of it, I need to have enough of this cardio in my tank to be able to perform, right? And that could either be high-end speed work or that could just be the endurance side of kind of the aerobic activity that I'm doing, right? So whatever that is, like to not get too lost here, like you want to make sure that you're stacking progressions across that, right? So let's just take running. If you're someone that's trying to improve your running, we want to track the pace that you're doing these workouts at, right? Or these runs at, I'm sorry. Right? Like how many, minutes per mile are you running that at? What heart rate or what zone were you training at, right? So let's just say I'm just trying to specifically work on zone 2. My thing that I would want to see over time is if you're using technology, a Garmin, a Whoop, an Aura, an Apple Watch, anything, and you're able to actually physically see where you're at zone 2. If not, obviously a conversational pace or a nasal breathing pace, like something you kind of maintain that. What I would like to see over time either is more distance or an improvement in the pace minute per mile, right? Assuming that you're at the same zone, right? So those are like two things that I can look at as progressions over time, right? Now, if I'm trying to improve speed, maybe I'm going to go do a track work and I'm going to do like repeat 400s, right? Where I'm going to run 400 and I'm going to walk 400. Or I'm going to run 400 and I'm going to rest 2 or 3 times the amount of time it took me, right? So let's say, hey, it took me 70 seconds to run a lap. I would rest for 140, 210 seconds, things like that, right? So like maybe 2 or 3 minutes post. That, what I would like to see is the output, right? Is like the actual speed that I'm actually getting from it. Or if the speed's staying the same, because maybe I'm trying to look at reducing like RPE, rated perceived exertion, is I ran 70 seconds and then maybe a month later I ran 70 seconds again. But the first time I ran it, it felt like an 8 out of 10 effort. The second time I ran it, it felt like a 6 out of 10 effort. So there's plenty of things, right? I think that's one of the biggest things that most people screw up is they're not tracking the data, right? They're not tracking the weights or the speed or the times, whatever the variable might be. And they're not progressing that over time, right? So if you're, like I said, if you're in a stage where you're actually trying to progress there or progress, you want to make sure that you're using the data tracking and you're making sure that you're progressively overloading that over time, right? Because if you do the same effort level, if you do the same intensity, same volume, same weight, whatever, you're going to eventually flatline, right? Because your body doesn't have a reason to go through a new level of adaptation to actually progress, right? It doesn't have a reason to build more muscle, doesn't have a reason to improve its speed, doesn't have a reason to improve its aerobic capacity. So you want to give your body a reason for adaptation to actually happen, right? So when you think about the progress and the results that we're all here for, That adaptation is what's facilitating the results. But if you're not giving the proper stimulus, there is no need for an adaptation, right? So that would be like kind of the first thing I would say is, right, is like proper structure of like how your workouts are. Now, as far as like how long should you stay in a workout, how many weeks, how many months, how many days should I be doing it? I think for me, here's the way I would look at it. If your frequency is low, I would probably write 2 weeks of workouts. If your frequency is 3, 4 plus, then I would write 1 week of workouts and I would repeat them a certain amount of times, right? Here's why repetition is important, right? In order for you to get good at anything in life, doesn't matter if I'm trying to learn a new language or if I'm trying to get stronger, if I'm trying to get faster, I need to have enough repetition because that repetition of that stimulus is what's going to give your body a consistent reason to go through a level of adaptation. If you do something once and you do it hard once, your body is obviously going to be sore, it's going to be broken down, but there's not a continuous repetitive stimulus that's obviously giving your body the actual reason to say, okay, we need to go through an adaptation for this, right? If it's a one and done thing, there is no need for adaptation, right? So as far as like how many weeks, how many months, that question, I always liked, I mean, personally, the way I do it here is we do a 6-week cycle. We do a second 6-week cycle that's progressive to the first one, and we do a 1 week deload. So it's 6, 6, 1, it's 13 weeks for the mesocycle. For anybody that's maybe training by themselves or anybody that maybe is doing anything alone or on top of their training, I think anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks is plenty fine, right? And here's why. There's this rule of 45, and this is kind of, I forget who says this, but this is kind of like an old strength and conditioning rule, which is basically like spend 45 days in our program, spend 45 minutes in the gym, right? The 45 minutes in the gym is basically if you're giving enough stimulus, you don't need to be in the gym for hours, right? A lot of times people that hang out in the gym for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, unless you're a professional athlete that's doing really, really long rest sets or you're taking kind of break, and like there's obviously context as always, but for most of us in general population, myself included, you should, not including warm up or cool down or maybe mobility stuff, I would say from training, right? Your intense training should be no longer than 45 minutes, right? If you're doing it properly, you shouldn't really have that much energy left anyways, right? The 45 day, which is the second part to the rule of 45, is basically saying that around 45 days, which if you were to think about mathematically, 7 days times 6 weeks would be about 42 days. That's kind of how I like adopted my style. What that basically, that rule is saying is like, hey, you're going to see a level of adaptation. You're going to see an improvement, right? You're going to see improvement in your strength. You're going to see improvements in your body comp, speed, whatever you're testing. Eventually, there's going to be this turnaround point or this flat line where you're starting to plateau. And that plateau is basically your body saying, okay, I'm used to this form of training. I'm used to this rep range. I'm used to this tempo. I'm used to this weight. So I don't think there's really a necessary need for me to continually adapting because like what you've given me, I've kind of adapted to. And the unfortunate part about training is it's not linear. It's not like you just keep getting to add weight over and over and over and over again, right? Unless you're someone that's utilizing like anabolics, probably pretty tough. So I would say for most of us, 4 to 8 weeks is going to be kind of a sweet spot, and then rewrite a new program, right? Rewrite something new to give your body a new stimulus, right? And it could be more volume, less volume, could be more weight, less weight to start. It could be different rep ranges, could be different tempos or time under tensions. Plenty of ways, different range of motion. Okay, so that would be number one, is proper structure. Number two, and I would say this is the biggest fault that I continually see in the gym all the time, myself being a big part of this, and then just clients that I see in the gym. And I know there's so many people. Like when I was at Gold's Gym yesterday, I was thinking about that. Is the number one thing for me is intensity. There needs to be enough intensity. One of the things when it comes to like, if you want to be really pragmatic and just like analytical with how you view your training, yeah, you can go off percentage-based lifting. You can be really specific with the reps and sets and the time under tensions or how you're doing these pyramids. Like there's so many details inside of programming. For most of us, and I would say even me being a big part of this, even though I do nerd out on that stuff, we don't really give a shit about that, or we don't even really necessarily want to give the energy or time to actually write it out or plan it out. The number one thing I can give you to take home is there needs to be enough intensity in your training. If your training is not intense, your body doesn't know, oh, I got 315 in the bar. Your body doesn't know, oh, this is an uphill run, right? Your body understands that, holy shit, this is way more intense than it normally is. If I'm always using heavy weights, there's going to be some context, and I'll follow up with that with the next part. Your body goes, oh shit, well, we have to get stronger to adapt to this stimulus, right? Like, oh my God, these runs are so hard. In order for me to continually keep up this pace or continually keep up this distance, I need to improve my aerobic capacity. I need to improve my lactate threshold. I need to improve these things, so these variables, I can handle that stimulus. And that is really at just the foundational level, and it's just a measurement of intensity. Like that's where your body is really going like, okay, based off this level of intensity, if something's not intense, what is the body's need for adaptation? Think about it. Like, well, why would your body need to go through adaptation? It's like, okay, cool. I can handle that. I can handle that weight. I can handle that pause. I can handle that run. Now, if it's something where it's like, oh shit, I can barely handle it, or like, oh my God, I feel like I'm borderline dying. Like there's this balance of like, in the CrossFit world, we used to call this the pain cave. And this is one of my things that I will say, like, context, because I think a lot of people got hurt of this mentality, but I do love conditioning and endurance athletes, and things that kind of get you in what we used to call the pain cave of like, you need to get almost into a dark place sometimes when you get into workouts. And most clients, and even for most of you probably listening to this, nobody likes hard workouts, right? And I don't want to say nobody. Not a lot of people like hard workouts, right? Like we would love to just see results without a lot of effort. I would love to be rich without having to work hard. I would love to be super lean without having to diet hard. I would love to have a great relationship without having to put effort into communicating, giving time. Like we would love that, of course, but like that's not the reality of life. The reality of life is like there is a level of sacrifice and effort that needs to be given to something to actually see a positive change in it. So I think a lot of times we run from this intensity. We run away from this, like something like, oh, it's being hard. And that's where this adoption of a new mindset and perspective of like the balancing act of these two things, like I said, I'll follow up in a second, is like you need to have periods of really intense training sessions, really intense cycles, really intense seasons, right? Or really intense years sometimes, right? I think about that with like even just like business. Is like sometimes I'm like, I get in a place where I'm like, oh, like kind of things are operating well. Like we have all the people in the right place. And it's like, oh, I'm opening a new location. Or, oh, shit, this person's leaving and moving away. Or, hey, I'm hiring a new person, so I need to train them. So like, it's very cyclical with work sometimes too. And I think about that same thing with training, right? Like it's going to be cyclical. Like there's going to be a season of really, really hard training, but there's going to be seasons of hopefully not so hard training, because that balancing act is obviously what gives you longevity and allows it to work and not burn out. So just remember that. Like the number 2 point I can give you guys is like you need to have a lot of intensity behind your training, which is going to help with the progressive overload and obviously going to play into the proper structure. And the next part, which is basically the opposite side of what I was just saying, is during periods of intensity or seasons of intensity, there now needs to be periods of deloading and recovering. This is the thing that most people find the most boring in training, right? This is the reason why most people skip on this probably out of everything else, right? And even like we have our deload week. I'm filming this Christmas week. So like actually, well, we're in deload week. I'm sorry. So I don't know when you guys are going to hear this. Might be a week or two from now. But right in the deload week, one of the things that I've always found interesting is like, when I open up the gym, I think we programmed deload right away. It was either right away or it might have been added maybe like it was definitely within the first year. And I remember always thinking about that in the strength and conditioning world. If I was training someone that was a little bit more of a high output athlete or somebody just has really like high levels of training, the biggest mistake that someone can make, and I made this a lot myself, which is why I personally went through this like journey, was like not dedicating enough time to deloading and recovering, right? Like a deload week is basically meant to say like, hey, we're still going to move, but instead of prioritizing weights or instead of prioritizing intensity or instead of prioritizing volume, we're going to maybe prioritize more tempo work. We're going to maybe prioritize more isometrics and eccentric type of things. Maybe we're going to prioritize more body weight. Maybe we're going to prioritize more low aerobic type of work. Those things, right? Allow your body to still move, still breathe, still train, but allow for some type of active recovery, right? I think recovery can come from a passive way of like just literally taking days off. Like, I was just watching a video yesterday that was talking about like, oh, like the guy was ranking like, S tier to D tier. I don't know if you guys see that stuff on the internet. The guy was like training 7 days a week and he was like F tier. He's like, that's like, unless you're a really high output athlete that's doing this for a living professionally, and this is why athletes, I don't think from a health or longevity perspective is ideal, is you're going to see some diminishing returns, right? Or you need to have such an intense allocation of recovery protocols in place based off your nutrition, your recovery, your team on chiropractic, soft tissue work, mobility, all that stuff. Then you could obviously get away with doing that. But even then, like, I don't think any athlete is training at that high intensity 7 days a week, because that would be stupid. Like, no coach would ever like be like, yeah, that's a great idea. Now, don't get me wrong. There's periods of it, maybe in season, maybe it's just like a little more active with training itself. But there's also needs to be periods where we deload and we recover. The way that I like to give people an analogy is like, think about this with work. Would you work 52 weeks a year without a vacation? 99% of us would say, fuck no. Like, there's a reason why we always say, like, the golden rule is like, oh, we all work 50 weeks a year because, like, we're given the typical 2 weeks vacation. I think, remember, it's different for everyone, right? Some people take vacations more, some people take vacations less. Same thing with deloading. I think really the more intense your work is or your working out is, the more times you're going to need deload. If you're training at a low frequency with lower intensity, sure, you can get away with not needing to do that. But if you are someone that's training or like working really hard and like working a lot of hours, then yeah, it's important for you to take time and take time off. I think about that with some of my coaches that are the busier ones. I'm always just like promoting them, like, please go take a week off, go take time off. Like you're addicted to work in like the best possible way, which makes them great coaches. But also I know the longevity side of it of like what's going to make them happy. And also I just know what works for me. It's like, I need to have periods where I can disconnect. Right? Like a slow Sunday for me is magical from a weekly basis, right? A little long week vacation, maybe monthly, great. Maybe a longer 3-5 day vacation quarterly or whatever it is for me. It's like, those are just magical things for me that allow me to stay motivated and really have a good balance of work-life balance and a higher output. So just remember, as far as the thing that I think most people are missing, as far as what this episode's focused on, don't skip on deloads and really, really make a high priority for your recovery, right? Prioritize your sleep, prioritize your nutrition, prioritize your slower days of training, prioritize your zone 2 over your high output, like zone 3, 4, 5 plus work, all those things, right? Which is going to kind of lead me into these last two things, which are like stacking post-workout items. And the first one I'll start with, because I think it's a little bit more in relationship to what I'm talking about with deload and recovering, is mobility. I think one of the biggest things that most people still to this day, and myself included, and even the coaches, I would say, that we skip out on the most, everyone loves training. The people that are going to the gym, and people that are going to the gym, they like training. They like lifting weights. They like barbells, squats, and deadlifts. We all like the same stuff. It's fun, right? You get this endorphin rush. You get this dopamine rush where it's just like, oh, wow, I did something. I got to move some weights. What I do see is most people don't really care for mobility. I like to show up a little late class. I don't have to do my warm up, right? I like to run out of the gym as soon as my cool down stretches are beginning. Don't really prioritize any soft tissue at home or any mobility at home. And like those items are what are going to lead to a diminishing return in your longevity behind your training. And more importantly, and this is something that I'm literally saying to myself, looking at this mirror through this camera, is like, I don't prioritize it until it's a problem. Right? Like right now, I feel like I'm a little beat up. I'm a little tense. I'm a little bit stiff. I've been training really hard for the last month. And I'm just like the reminder of like, I gotta be more disciplined with this. I gotta be more organized with how I structure my mobility inside the training, right? If like instead of sitting there resting or being on my phone or answering an email between a set, it's like I should just be doing some type of mobility work. I should be doing some soft tissue. I should be doing some corrective stretching. I should be doing some isometrics. I should be doing something maybe a little bit more passive stretching, whatever it is. But the mobility is going to give you the longevity. Same thing with the car. I'm a car guy, so I'll think about it this way. In order for my car to run for a long period of time, I have a 2024 car and I have a 1969 car, right? The 1969 is obviously a hell of a lot older, right? It's 55, 56 years old. It requires more maintenance. It requires more consistent warming up. It requires more consistent driving, because if not, the battery will die, right? The thing will overheat. The belts will snap. Like all these things kind of just that I'm like, fuck, this is never a problem with my new car. Well, yeah, it's new. You can get away with it. It's like talking to a 19-year-old that's training really hard. And it's like, you need to deload. You need to do mobility. They don't give a shit about it. The reason why they don't give a shit about it, it's not a problem. There's no need, right? They're going to, unfortunately, there's going to be a select few of people that are going to be smart enough to listen to the information that's out there and understand the priority of doing mobility is going to give them longevity. Or there's going to be idiots like myself that are going to train really hard, run into an injury, run into another injury, and figure out why the fuck do I keep getting injured, and then finally go through this revelation. And who knows, maybe it works for you. That's what got me to opening up a gym. It's what got me to, changing my philosophy on training and life and period. So I don't think it's a necessarily bad thing, but like I could have avoided it if I learned and I listened. But or if I just learned. I don't know if I necessarily was even told that. So really make a more diligent act towards doing your mobility. And the last part that I would say, which is a big thing that I'm doing with this nutrition challenge and something that I was really doing religiously during my men's physique competitions. You see this with bodybuilders, you see this at bigger gyms, and me going to Golds a lot more this last month. I've realized that I'm like, I'll go work out, and then I'll go do 20 minutes on the stairs. I'll do, like yesterday, I did a 20-minute walk on an incline. But the thing is high up on an incline, put it at, 3.5 miles per hour. I'm kind of like power walking. I'll do that for 20 minutes. When you guys are already here, right? And I'm like, I want to make this a bigger thing at FL of like, because I think the most underutilized things that I have at the gym that are not consistently used are the cardio piece of equipment. The skiers, the rowers, the bikes, the airdynes, whatever. They're only used maybe 1 day a week for a certain workout, right? And then there's some cycles where I don't even touch any of them, and we have to bring them out every day, well, Mountain View, and they're not used. I would love to make this more of a thing where people stay for an extra 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes and do some slow aerobic work, right? I'm not saying do intense work. Don't go do airdyne sprints. Do something you can conversationally do it with a partner after class, right? Go on the skier, you can do something longer, right? Maybe if you want to do a little circuit, you can. But I would say if you could prioritize two things, which are the two ones that I said are stackable, is doing mobility and doing aerobic, not anaerobic. Anaerobic is what you guys would see in the gym in the conditioning that we write. It's very intense. It's a lot shorter by duration. Aerobic, I can have a conversation. I can breathe through my nose. I can sing the whole time. It's an easy pace, right? That is going to allow you to remember aerobic is going to be more of a fat oxidating zone, right? So you're going to allow your body to burn more fat per calorie. It's not more overall calories, but more fat per calorie. And that's going to really, from a cardiovascular perspective and in zone 2 aerobic kind of threshold perspective, it's going to allow you to improve those biomarkers, right? So a lot of times we have weight loss at the foundation of our goal, or feeling good or energy. Aerobic activity gives you that, right? And the one thing that you guys all need to remember is majority of you listening to this right now are either sitting in a car listening to this, sitting at home, reading this on an email, whatever it might be, and you are sedentary more times than you should be, right? I am somebody that talks about this all the time, and I get like 10 to 12, 10 to 15,000 steps a day. Like, I'm on my feet a lot more than most people are, but I have coaches that work a lot more than I do. Or at least consistently as far as training sessions go. And like they're doing 18,000 steps, 25,000 steps. Some of them I even see Sal show me a 30,000 step day, right? So there's some people that get the luxury of having a job where they're actually very active on their feet. And there's some of us, and unfortunately most of us, that are sitting behind a desk for a living, either at an office or at home, or sitting behind a car with their job, or just more sedentary. And that is not going to help with your goal. Like, one of the God tier things that I can give you guys is you got to hit 8 to 12,000 steps a day, right? Like the 8,000 is like the minimum effective dose to really see some of the things we want. And yes, the cool thing about walking is it is kind of just almost linear. With the more that we have, the more improvements we get. But since most of us are not hitting that goal, what's an easy thing that we can do when we're already here? If you're already at the gym twice a week, 3 times a week, 4 times a week, stay another 15 to 30 minutes. Make it a little bit longer. I know for some of us it doesn't seem realistic. Maybe once a week, maybe twice a week, right? Like, give some days a little bit more attention towards the aerobic activity you're going to get. You're going to get so many more benefits outside of what you're doing, and it's easy from the habit formation because you're here, right? And that's where I think a lot of us fail. A lot of us are rushing the cool down, skipping mobility, and wondering why we don't move well, or why we're in pain. A lot of us are still struggling with losing weight or losing fat, and not really doing a lot of cardio, and then they wonder why they do it. Well, they skip it, right? So it's like, do the things that allow it to make it a habit easier, but like those are the big things, right? So number one, just to kind of recap real quick, proper structure, how you put your cycles together, how you're progressively overloading, whatever that goal might be. Number two is intensity. You got to make your workouts intense enough to actually see change. Number three is you got to actually have good deloading and recovering, which is the balancing act of intensity. The more intensity, the more you need to prioritize it. Less intense, less need for it. Then stacking those two items on top, which is like, stay here, do a little more mobility and foam roll or stretch. Stay here, do a little bit more aerobic activity, easy work that you can go on a bike, on a rower, on a jump rope, on a skier, a light run, whatever that might be, right? All right, guys. Well, hope you got some good info out of that one. I will see you guys next week. Take care.